friends, we welcome you on behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India Habitat Center. Fifth, sorry. Habib Tanveer Memorial Lecture.
It's a great honor for me to be asked to deliver the fifth Habib Tanveer Memorial Lecture. I am both humbled and challenged by the invitation. This perspective, in my view, doesn't exist. This nowhere, anywhere kind of perspective. And in my writings on interculturalism, I've always tried to stress that, if you want to deal with this phenomenon honestly, you've just got to inscribe the politics of your location. And it's my contention that there's no way that you can avoid the national. It's extremely counterproductive to avoid the national, because then you allow nationalists to define it for you, right? Even if we assume it's a non-commercial archive, then how have they contributed to the educational and intellectual capital of these researchers? Now, in more mainstream political discourse, there's a very clear-cut distinction made between civic nationalism and ethnic nationalism. Civic nationalism being linked to the larger context of citizenship, which would appear to work on across class and caste and so on more or less equal grounds, depending, of course, if you happen to be a citizen. There could be many people living within the boundaries of a nation state who are not citizens, okay? Stuart Hall had tried very hard to break down the equivalences between national and nationalism. These are his categories. But I'm afraid he didn't do very much about it, even though he seemed to be very much, I think, under the influence of the great Frantz Fanon, who in his essay on national culture, he ends the essay on national culture with these remarkable sentences. If nationalism is not enriched and deepened by a very rapid transformation into a consciousness of social and political needs, in other words, into humanism, it leads up a blind alley. Historicality connotes a sense of being in the world, whereby the poet claims the lived experience of everyday life through the mediation of his inner soul, ontorato. But of course, he's left us with many, many clues in his poems, and I'm just going to read finally from one of my favorite writings, Creative Unity, where he introduces us to an ascetic woman who is mad about all things, a Chantal actually, and who with her star-like eyes startles Tagore with a question. So obviously, with a passage like this, we're dealing with a very, very different epistemology of India that has very little to do with the official discourse of nationalism. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment. So I'm going to come to the last part of my lecture, and I want to pay tribute to my discipline of theatre. I probably come across to you as a theorist. I am a theorist. But nothing I theorize could have been possible without my practice in theatre. And this very complex relationship between national and nationalism actually came alive for me in a very, very vibrant way while I was working on an intercultural project in Adelaide, Australia, a project called Cluster. The erstwhile Prime Minister of Australia, who had made himself extremely infamous at that time by saying, we will decide who comes into the country and the circumstances in which they come, referring to asylum seekers, refugees, boat people desperately seeking shelter in Australia, and he said, get out. It really makes me aware, why does interculturalism matter? It does not matter because of what Peter Brook did with the Mahabharata or what, for God's sake. And we turn to the ascetic woman who tells Tagore, you know, you don't know how to see, and he in turn sees in her the spirit of India. Thank you.
And this was both a brilliant and a very moving presentation. But if you have any questions or comments, then he is willing to take them. Be brief, sharp, ask one. So Rustom, thank you very much. I think Habib Tanveer's soul must be blessing you for giving us this journey and also telling us how hospitality and permission from the elders remain important aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.